Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Mundanara Bales.
It's about us as Aboriginal people, regardless of title.
You know, relationalism, not war making, is the best way to have security.
Now is the best time to be a black fellow, especially in business.
It's so powerful to see successful Aboriginal women.
I am a survivor of stolen generations.
I'd like to begin this podcast by acknowledging the Kabi Kabi and Gubbi Gubbi peoples here on the Sunshine Coast. I'd also like to acknowledge their elders past and present and acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We have never ceded our sovereignty as First Nations peoples living in this country now known as Australia. Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast, and it's always a pleasure to yarn to people from all walks of life. And I yarn to a lot of Indigenous people, First Nations peoples, but I also yarn to people who are non-Indigenous but are doing some amazing things that I feel that everyone needs to know. And this is a yarn where I've been online, kind of, it sounds a bit creepy, but Gali, you probably hear this a lot. I've been stalking you in a good way because I am absolutely, not just fascinated, but I'm inspired by the work that you do. So before we even get to that conversation, I just want to say, Gali, welcome to the podcast and thank you so much for, jumping on today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I was really honoured when I saw the email.
There you go. And I know that a lot of the audience or listeners or followers, whatever you want to call, people that are enjoying the episodes that we're pumping out week in and week out, not everybody, listens to hear from Indigenous people. I think a lot of people listen because they're connecting to people's stories and experiences and also people's ideas and motivations and contributions to society. And I think this is a podcast, like this episode, this yarn we're having now is going to be one of those episodes where people will, I know, say to me, thank you so much for having Gali on your podcast, because now they're following you or they're able to actually contribute in some way to the work that you're doing at the Good Box Stories. So before we get to that, with all of my guests, Gali, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in a way that Aboriginal people have been doing for tens of thousands of years. So it's not what you do that's important from an Aboriginal perspective, it's who you are. So I'm going to hand the microphone over to you.
So my name is Gali Blacher, and it's quite like a Jewish name, I guess, because my first name is Hebrew and it means wave in the ocean. And so I really like that. I think it's a good description of my personality in a way, because I'm pretty relaxed and calm majority of the time. But then, I've got nice waves that come now and then. And sometimes it's tsunami.
Watch for the wave or watch for the crash or the boom.
Exactly. So, but most of the time it's, gentle and calm. And yes, be careful for these big waves. So that's what my mom likes to say anyway. And so I was born in South Africa in Cape Town. So my parents were both born in South Africa as well, but they were born in Johannesburg. So I'm the only one that was born in Cape Town. And I have an older sibling. It was actually adopted. So I'm biological, but my parents struggled a lot to have kids. My mom was actually told she would never be able to have children biologically. So, and they tried and, just nothing happened. So they went on the adoption route. And so they adopted my sister, and I think she was born in Johannesburg, if I'm correct. And they adopted her, and she's amazing. She's just the best. It's pretty obvious that we're adopted because I'm quite dark and she is very, very white. And so we look it's quite obvious that we look quite different to each other. But we like to have a lot of fun with it. And my parents look a lot like me. So we like to pretend that I'm the one that was adopted, and people get a bit they get a bit confused because you have to see my parents to see why that's a bit funny. But basically sadly, I was then born 6 years later, and I was born biologically, and that was, my parents see it as a bit of a miracle, and because my mum never fell pregnant again before or after me. So it's just my sister and I. And when I was growing up, like, my parents are both teachers. My dad's always been very into the community and just helping those around us. And so I just grew up with, having people in and out my house, handing out food packages, and just anyone in the community that needed help. My dad was always there. And so was my mom, but my dad was very outwardly about it. And, that I think helped me, that I just grew up seeing that all the time. And I think that's why as an adult I decided to then, do something in the social scene and in helping people experiencing homelessness and in all of that, because of how I grew up seeing that all the time. And so that was a really big part of everything that we did. And then I moved to Australia when I was I moved to Australia when I was 10, and I moved to Perth actually. And I loved living there, and it was a really beautiful place to live. And then I moved when I was 17 for my last year of school to Sydney, which was a bit scary because I went from this tiny little private school, little Jewish school, which I loved, to a very big Jewish school in Sydney. And I was like one of 120 people, and I was not yet a confident adult, so that I am now. And so it was very daunting. I had never before seen that many people in like one year group. And it was, coming from a tiny school where there was like 16 girls in my year group to now have like 117 people or something like that in 1 year. It was a lot. So I moved from Perth, which was seen as being small, to Sydney, and then I ended up studying to be a journalist when I finished school. So that was really a big part of, I love telling people stories and I love sharing people's stories. And then I guess I travelled, I did all of that fun stuff, and then we can go into the good box a bit later, but I then met my husband. And he is also Jewish, and he's lovely, and his background is Russian. And I met him when I was about 5 years ago. And then we ended up moving to Townsville because he is starting to be a vet. So
out of all places in the country, that's the last place I was expecting you. I was like South Africa, Johannesburg, Perth, Sydney, and now we're in Townsville. No offence to any of my mob and any listeners that are from Townsville. It's a beautiful place, but I'm like, Townsville, all right. So, your husband.
You know what? It's so funny. I get this similar. They're like, oh, you've been, born in beautiful Cape Town, and then Perth, and then Sydney, and then all these places. And then, when I went on a couple of different travel times and exchanges, and I went all over the world. And then it's funny that I ended up in Townsville, but I will defend Townsville because I used to, when I first moved here, I was like, what am I doing here? And then I love it. Like, the community here are just so beautiful. Everyone is so, I find everyone quite lovely in terms of helping, supporting just in that very small community ways. And so we are going to be moving next year once Jacob's finished his degree. But so we ended up here because of his degree, and we got married third time lucky in April.
Congratulations.
So we were supposed to get married in July last year in Southern Highlands in New South Wales. And that obviously didn't work because of COVID. And then we tried again in October last year, and that again didn't work. And then, funnily enough, just before everything went crazy in New South Wales, we got in our wedding on the 29th of April. And I was able to still have our big Jewish wedding. Not as big. It was supposed to be 180 people, so it ended up being 120 people instead. I was able to have all the cultural stuff that I was really worried we weren't going to be able to have, because something that's really important at Jewish weddings is doing like the hora. Like I'm sure a lot of people might have just seen that on like sitcoms on American TV or whatever, but it's basically like just really, it's very close dancing. So you're like, you dance a lot, but you dance really on top of each other. And so obviously like during COVID restrictions wasn't allowed. And
it's like 1.5 meters apart, and that's the closest we're going to get on the dance floor. Or was it just you on the dance floor and no guest could dance? Because I've seen that's been...
I know. Well, actually, we ended up having no restrictions. So, like, we were so lucky.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, because I don't know if you've ever been to a Jewish wedding.
I haven't, but I've been to, like, 200, I'm not kidding, maybe 300 Greek weddings because I used to work at the Greek club.
Oh, hilarious.
So I don't know if they're very similar.
They are similar. They're very similar.
Okay.
Like, they're similar. Yeah. So if you've been to a Greek wedding, I mean, I think they're similar. Okay. Maybe some people debate me on that. Yes. Just a disclaimer, just my personal opinion. But it's very similar in that, like, it would be very hard to do it in restrictions. And anyone who was able to do that in restrictions, I think that's amazing. But I definitely was like, just culturally would have felt really off for me if we couldn't do all those things. I feel very privileged and lucky that it worked out, because 2 weeks later it all fell back to, bad stuff.
Crap again. It went back to crap again.
Exactly. And I mean, that's everything I can think of about myself.
I love it.
Without talking about the good box.
Well, I absolutely love it, because that information, I could not find that on the internet, right? And that's what's so beautiful about this podcast. Well, I think it's beautiful that we get to kind of, I don't know, it's like you and I are just sitting at your house or mine, and we're getting to know each other from scratch. And we're sharing information that, some of it is kind of intimate, personal, deep even, information. We're sharing that with each other, and we don't even know each other. But in your introduction, I connected with a whole lot of that, because first, my mob are from outside of Townsville, right? So I've got a lot of cousins in Townsville.
Oh, amazing.
I was born and raised in Sydney, and you had lived in Sydney. I had a big traditional Fijian wedding in Fiji.
Wow. Amazing.
So, and that was before COVID, of course. That was 3 years ago. And I wanted my children, who were Aboriginal Kiwi Fijian, to immerse themselves in their father's culture, because my husband didn't get to grow up in Fiji. My husband was adopted, and he was born and raised and educated in Aotearoa, which is the land of the long white cloud, aka New Zealand. So my kids are very confident Aboriginal kids, and they are very proud and know a lot about their Aboriginal side and culture and family, and they dance, they know their songs, and that, to me, I feel really proud of that. But I feel a little bit, not incompetent, I just feel that I haven't been as encouraging for them to be proud and confident as Fijian kids. So that's why I went to Fiji and kind of, dived into that culture and, learning along the way, what to do and what not to do, and how to say hello and say thank you, and all of that was really new. But I'm so thankful to my husband's family, who kind of just embraced us and knew that we were just kind of throwing ourselves in, we're in another country, we're getting married, we're meeting people for the very first time at our wedding.
Oh, my goodness.
My husband meets his biological mother properly at our wedding.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. So when you were talking about things that in your culture that are very important to you, everything that happened at my wedding, I did not know before the wedding. Like, I had no idea that my husband did not know 90% of his biological family. And I did not know that 120 were going to turn up that weren't on the list. So when you said 120, right, down from 180, I had 80 people on my guest list, and it went to 200.
Wow.
I know. So imagine getting a bill.
Wow.
And you wasn't even budgeting for that.
Oh, my goodness. Wow, I can't believe he met his biological mum at his wedding. That is so intense, though.
It is really intense.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. I was like blown away every day. I was just like, oh my God, like what's going to happen today?
Wow.
Who are we going to meet? What story are they going to tell us, and how many other brothers and sisters is he going to meet that he didn't know existed?
Wow.
I know. So your story, like I'm sitting here thinking of my wedding as well. So thank you.
That's awesome. And I guess there's also that like adoption thing that's a bit similar as well with my sister.
That's what I mean. When you started talking about that, my husband is pretty dark, a lot of Indigenous Fijians are quite dark. And my husband's dad is a Kiwi, a white New Zealander.
Oh, wow.
And they're both Peter John Peace. And recently, before COVID, they went back to New Zealand for I was going to say a wedding, but they went for a funeral.
Oh, no.
And the lady at the airport at immigrations looked at both of their passports, and they both have Peter John Peace. One's white, one's black. And she's looking at him, and you could just imagine she was confused. And my husband said, that's salt and I'm pepper. That's all he could think of. In that awkward moment where this lady was like, "They are how can they be related? They have the same name."
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, it happened to my sister and I growing up all the time, and like the opposite way. That like my parents and I are both like we're just very tan, so we're very olive skin.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we have like, I think if you have to go all the way back, we have some like Middle Eastern backgrounds, but I've never been able to really prove that, but I can only assume that that's why we're so olive skinned. But, my sister's just very white. And so it's just like so funny how we've always had that, those really awkward experiences like your husband had, and we just have to crack jokes every time. Always just have to crack jokes. That's the only way we're able to, the situation. And my parents were always very open with us about my sister being adopted. And so it's good because other people get a bit awkward, but the best way to handle it is through humour for sure.
I love it. Well, let's talk about the good box then. So take us back to even, I don't know, how did you even come up with this business?
Yeah, so basically I created this with my co-founder, Maddy. So Maddy and I are both co-founders of The Good Box.
Big shout out to you, Maddy. I'm sure you're going to be listening to this. Yeah. Maddy's always used to. She it's funny because I always say, "Do you want to join the podcast with me?" And she's like, "No, you do it all." So she's very comfortable with that. But so Maddy is wonderful, and we met each other in Sydney. And when we were both working at a company there, so I was working as a journalist. And Maddy was an events manager, and we were both working at the time on a charity magazine. So I was the editor of it, and Maddy was the events manager for the conference. And we worked really closely with each other, and we're also really around charities all the time. So we're around, other people doing good. So I guess, and also around a lot of social enterprises. And I think that I got really fascinated with the space, and I got a little bit, I think in my head, I was like, I don't know if I want to write about, like, I keep writing about all these things, but it would just be so awesome if I could do something rather than just write something. But I never wanted to do something for the sake of it. So I just left it at the time and just kept, working and doing what I did. But then Maddy and I both, within this same period of time, we realised around us there were a lot of people sleeping rough in the city of Sydney. So sleeping on the streets. But the thing that we noticed more than anything was the fact that they were ignored. So people would literally walk over them in disgust as if they were nothing, as if they were a rock, as if they're like, we're not human beings. Hey, I've got to add this right now before I forget.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I'm in Sydney, which is, before COVID, every week.
Yes.
And I stay in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And as I walk down the streets, I've got to tell you, and listeners, if people haven't, seen this firsthand, people that are homeless in Sydney, when they're asking for money, they do it with their heads down, right, like they're praying. They lay down, right, on their knees, their heads are down, and their cup is out in front of them with a sign. And what breaks my heart is that they're not even looking at people to kind of make eye contact. Yeah. And for me, it's like they'd rather not make eye contact and hopefully people will just put some money in their little jar. And to me, that literally, that image, when you said sleeping rough, took me back to seeing at least on every corner, if you're crossing, one of the major streets, George Street in the city, you will see one person on every corner and they're all in the same position. But you know what? I have never seen a homeless person in Brisbane or Melbourne or Perth or Adelaide or Darwin kneeling down on their knees, head to the ground with a cup. That's just in Sydney.
Yeah, it's so, you know what? I've actually never thought about the fact that was just in Sydney. Yeah. But if I think about it, you're very right in that every city has its very specific parts of homelessness. Like there's different things that are specific to different areas. And I think what was really so right in Sydney that was so noticeable at the time, and I think they've done a lot of work since then, but at the time it was very much like no one wanted to approach the situation, and the people themselves who were experiencing homelessness, just like you said, were very ashamed of where they were. And I guess that is a lot to do with them putting their heads down and the cups up. And the thing that I really noticed was that people were very ashamed of being experiencing homelessness, but also people walking past them would treat them like they were nothing. And when I spoke to those people who were walking to work with a cup of coffee in their hand, and I said, why do you cross the street? Like, why do you do that? Why do you ignore these people? Why don't you just smile or wave or, offer to buy a cup of coffee? Like, what is it about this person that you're, just treating them, as if they're nothing? And people would say, because the situation makes them feel like they are helpless, that they can't do anything to help the person, that they feel like, oh, I can't help you, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to ignore you and pretend you don't exist. And that was really, to me, showed a really big issue. One, it showed the fact that, and then the more I delved into this, the more I realised that the homeless community in Australia, more so, yes, hunger and all of that is still a prevalent problem, but the biggest issue is isolation. And so the more people are isolated and the more people are made to feel like they're nothing, the less likely they are to accept help from those around them. That really, showed me something, that there are a lot of service providers out there and there's a lot of different types of help and things like that. But you also have to think about that person experiencing homelessness then towards getting that help. There's people are human beings. They might, if you feel that you haven't been treated properly, if you feel that people aren't treating you like a human being, you're not going to be as accepting or as willing to go and accept that help. You're not going to trust that person, And so what we realized was that there was a lot of isolation. There was a lot of, issues of completely being just left out of society. And on the other hand, there was a lot of, okay, well, I don't know how to help. I don't know what to do for you. And so we wanted to create a really easy and tangible way of, one, just connecting people. So yes, I'll get to what's actually the Good Boxes in a second, but yes, products and food and first-hand items, all of that is so important. But more than that, it's the conversation. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do know, with both of our cultures as well, that talking is really important,
Well, that sense of community.
100%.
And family
100%.
And belonging is important, yeah.
100%. And I know that that's, for so good with it when it comes to mental health, when it comes to all of that. I know that having a chat and being part of community and all of that is really, really important. And if you feel completely out of that, then that can cause so many other different problems. And so what we realized was that we needed to create a way of connecting people. That was the biggest issue here. And we didn't want to, come and create something that already existed. So while there's other places, that are dealing with other parts of the homelessness issue, we wanted to really be able to connect people. And so what we ended up, before meeting Maddy, I had thought in my head of, imagine if there was a box that had beautifully wonderful items inside, but the idea is that you give it to someone and then you have that conversation, and then it's all about the communication, and it's a vehicle to communication, and that is all about dignity. And yes, you know, the items and the food and all of that is really important, but more than that, it's you belong here. You are an important part of this world, and the amazing positive effects that would come from that. And in return, it makes it really easy for someone to be able to do good and for someone to know what to do. And that they then being able to have a chat to someone experiencing homelessness as well, you're able to abolish those misconceptions, because one of our biggest missions of the Good Box is abolishing misconceptions of people experiencing homelessness. And so basically, from all of that and from all those discussions and me having this idea in my head, when Maddy came to me and said, you know, what can we do? You know, we really need to do something. I then told her my idea, and from that initial idea, it ended up becoming the Good Box, which is a social enterprise that creates beautifully packaged gift boxes that we give to people experiencing homelessness all over Australia. We've got 33 national charity partners across Australia. We make sure to help all different types of people. So all demographics, it's really, really important for us. And we also have the option that basically if you want to get a box for someone experiencing homelessness, you pop online, you pay $21.99 and you can opt for that to go to one of our charity partners. And if you don't want it to go to a charity partner, you can send it to your house and you can go and give that box directly to someone experiencing homelessness. We actually found that prior to COVID restrictions recently, Melbourne often opt to give those boxes directly, because I guess they're seeing people in the city quite often. So you get people who send boxes to their office, so they have it so that when they see someone experiencing homelessness, they can give that box and have a chat. But obviously it's more popular to send it through our charities. But the best part of everything is that we have when you go and you buy that box online for someone, you write a note for them. So that is that communication, that is that connection. So if you're not meeting them personally, you're still getting that communication. And so you write that note, and then we've got around 30 volunteers who actually write out those notes, and then we pop them in the boxes. And when we speak to the people themselves experiencing homelessness and they receive those boxes, what we hear is, wow, I love this. You know, we only give first-hand quality items, and each box tells a true and powerful story of someone experiencing homelessness. We really put a big emphasis in it being an amazing, beautiful gift filled with dignity. Yeah. But what they say to us is, more so than that, that note is what inspired me. That note is what helped me. And we have one particular story with this man. He's a refugee, and he's also transgender, and he's just had a very, I guess, rough time when he moved to Australia, and he experienced homelessness. And when we met him, we gave him a box, and in that box he received a note from the Good Box that we gave him, and that note helped him feel that he was connected, and that made him feel that he belonged. And the person who wrote the note for him was actually a corporate, we do corporate education programs, so we educate people about homelessness, and we also do that at schools. And so that was one of the people that actually had written the note. And he just felt like, well, if this person who's, you know, works a corporate job and took the time to sit down and write me a note, like, that means so much to me. And that inspired him, and he ended up actually making sure he went for an interview that he didn't feel at the time the courage to do, but after reading the note he did. And after receiving this beautiful box filled with first-hand items, it just made him feel good, due to the fact that he unfortunately was so used to getting second-hand items.
Yeah, that's interesting that you have kind of reiterated that everything in that box is beautiful. It's not pre-loved, you know, or secondhand, or used by, like, some foods that you may get from, I'm not saying all charities, but some of them may have reached their use by date if it's kind of shelf food or, you know, cupboard food. So in these boxes, give us an idea of, like, what would be in a box.
Oh, yeah. So basically with Jack, I'll just tell you that when he had got that note and he got the box, he ended up actually going for that interview, getting a job, due to this note, and this was 2 years ago. And so when we spoke to him recently, he said, I still have the note with me and I keep it with me all the time.
Wow.
And that's really beautiful to us. But yeah, going back to the boxes, the reason I keep saying things like first-hand quality, beautiful box is because that's, I guess, our point of difference. And I agree. I think it's wonderful to, in certain ways, to be able to, when you can use pre-loved things, that's wonderful. But dignity is really important. And so when you're trying to cheer someone up and you're trying to help someone to, take charge and accept the help and all of that, I think by giving them secondhand or old food, it's just going to remind them like, oh, you don't matter. And so that's why you want to make them feel like they belong, which they do. And that's why we
and
put
feel
those
special. It's like a gift, like a birthday present, a Christmas present. They're unwrapping. They're opening up a box, a gift that was packaged for them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
you're so right. And basically we've got a girls box, a blokes box, a unisex box, and then we've got a pets box, and then we've got some other boxes that come up throughout the year, all different types that like are, winter specific and Father's Day specific and Mother's Day specific. But our general boxes, will have anything that you can imagine that if anyone got themselves into a situation or, just found themselves in a situation, I should say, where they had nothing. It's everything you think that you would need in that moment. So it's, toothpaste, toothbrush, pads, Foreman, tampons, soap, shampoo, conditioner, baby wipes, which is used as wipes for your body, and a face towel, muesli bars, fruit cups. Men get baked beans. We get little chocolates as well, which even though it's not really a necessity, it's also just about making that person feel, wanted and just like something a little special. Our goodie boxes, the unisex one, actually have a notebook and have a pen, and we also put little vouchers in. We work with different organisations. We get Domino's vouchers sometimes, we get muffin break vouchers sometimes, we get grilled vouchers sometimes, and we always make sure to put something extra and fun. We have chapsticks. We actually now for the women also have Moddy Body underwear, so that's the reusable period underwear.
Yes.
So that's excellent. Yes, we've got that. And so that's that's like our main boxes. But if you go on our website, anyone listening, you can go and see the full list. But actually, it's always a bit fuller than what we have on the website, because whenever we often whenever we get some extra things, we just make sure the boxes are as filled as possible, and especially during Christmas, but we do get more support during Christmas as well, so we're able to make the boxes as filled as possible, which is excellent. And like I said, we make sure that it's all good products and all of that, and we also put these wonderful immunity powders in all of our boxes as well, which actually is a huge hit, especially with everyone pretty worried about the immune system at the moment. And so that's just the gist of what our boxes are all about, and how the Good Box came along. But obviously it wasn't just like a jump and we had this organisation. It was a lot of struggle. I obviously had to end up leaving my job, and so did Maddy. We only became full-time the Good Box a year ago. But yeah, it was a huge struggle how you manage a full-time job and also having an organisation on the side. We were in our early 20s at the time. Like, how do you even know what you're doing? And how did I even getting money? We won a competition, which is how we were able to get our money to start the organisation. But really it's just been a lot of hustling and a lot of sharing our story wherever we can. And it wasn't until a year ago when we were able to get onto the project that really helped us to share our story widely and get the help that we needed for the people who really need it. And and that's how we've ended up where we are now, and in the position where we've in the last year been able to distribute 12,000 boxes. And we started off, the first year we did 200 boxes, and I thought that was amazing. I was like, oh my God, we've done 200 boxes.
Which is a huge achievement to be able to do that without any funding, without any support.
Yeah, well, at the time I thought it was wonderful, and I remember going to try get funding, and I said, oh, yeah, we did 200 boxes all by ourselves with no extra help. Maddie and I had to put in a lot of our own money as well. And the person was like, 200 boxes, that's not that impressive. And I was like, I thought it was at the time. But yes, now.
And now you're at 12,000 boxes. I just want to ask some of the charities that you're working with.
Yes.
Are there any Indigenous charities? That's what I'm interested in.
Yes, there is. Yeah, definitely. We do work with a few Indigenous charities, and we just got a really wonderful new partner in Townsville, which is really excellent. And so we got TARS. I think that's
TARS,
the Townsville, Townsville Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Service.
Yes.
So we just started working with them, which is really excellent. And there's actually a cute little picture of me and one of the ladies there on the Good Box Instagram. And so we work with them, which is excellent. And then we also work in we were working really closely with Yumba Meta in Townsville as well, which is also a First Nations charity. And then a lot of our boxes that go to Rua in Perth, majority of them go to Indigenous people as well in Perth. And we're also working in Perth with another organisation I used to work with this man, and he works a lot with people sleeping rough, but mainly Indigenous communities. And so we would send a lot of boxes to him. And
Gali, the reason why I was asking, is there any Indigenous charities? And for a lot of, people that are listening to this podcast, I'm not too sure if they know the stats, but 1 in 28 Indigenous people in this country are homeless. Now, that's about 23,000 Indigenous people, and that was of the census night in 2016. Now, in terms of the ratio of Indigenous to non-Indigenous people, the 2016 Indigenous homelessness rate was 10 times that of non-Indigenous Australians. The differences in the rates of homelessness for Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians were higher in remote and very remote areas than major cities. And that's really interesting as well, because I would say that, out of sight, out of mind. So if you don't live in remote or very remote, Australia, then you wouldn't know about this. But a lot of us as Indigenous people have family and are connected to mob across the country. And a lot of us, I guess we're impacted. We're impacted in terms of colonialism, impacted us, past government policies impacted us, stolen wages and stolen generations, the fact that there was no wealth or generational wealth passed down. So there are a lot of contributing factors when it comes to Indigenous people that are either homeless or sleeping rough, that people probably have no idea about. So I hope that by listening to this podcast, people start to think, okay, now I know why, because a lot of people are really quick to judge. So I'm hoping that, by having this yarn with you, Gali, that people either buy a box or they stop next time that they see somebody sleeping rough and say hello, and maybe even offer to buy a cup of coffee or even a bacon and egg McMuffin instead of just walking past them. That acknowledgement,
100%.
Yeah. Just put a smile on that person's face, because it's probably very rare that somebody just stops and acknowledges them.
100%. And I was actually going to say that, when it comes to when you asked about, if we're having Indigenous charity partners, well, we've got, I think, around 4, and, we actually sent a whole lot of boxes as well to Larrakia Nation in Darwin.
Yep.
We know that even the charity partners, there might not be actually Indigenous, First Nations or, Indigenous charities themselves. And like you said, because of those statistics, a lot of the people that it's reaching are Indigenous people, and because of that really high rate, and there's a lot of different reasons, as you mentioned, for that, and I think it's just really important for people to not to judge and to realise that there's unfortunately there's a lot of different reasons for it, and before we start to go, well, it's your fault, it's I hate that. I hate it when people say that. It's really ignorant, and it means that no one's looked into the reasons certain things happen. And majority of the time, it's just domino effects. People think, oh, it's drugs, oh, it's alcohol, and really, statistically, that's only 3% of the reason people become homeless.
Of course, there's a lot of women. There's a lot of women that are on the streets.
Violence
exactly.
Is the number one.
Another conversation that we need to start having, and I guess, what if it makes us feel uncomfortable? Well, we need to try living as an Aboriginal woman in terms of being uncomfortable and made to feel uncomfortable in certain spaces in society. But we will talk about that on another podcast because we are running out of time. But what I wanted to say really quickly is if, say, corporates, like I know a lot of people that I engage with at Black Card, and a lot of people that will be listening to this podcast will probably be thinking, how can they support you? Where do they go to connect with you? So would they go straight to your website, or is it social media? What's the best way to connect with you guys?
Well, the best way to connect with us is to go on thegoodbox.com.au, which is our website. And if you also want to follow us on Instagram, is at the Good Box Enterprise, and on Facebook is at the Good Box Enterprise as well, and also on LinkedIn as well. And those are the best ways, if you just if you want to be able to help us, especially now coming up to Christmas, we have a lot of assistance needed. So if you're wanting to purchase a box for $21.99, that's a great way. But if you're also wanting to buy presents for people, buy the Good Box, you can buy them a Good Box and they get a certificate. So what you do is you buy it in their name. So a box gets donated in their name to someone else who needs it, and they get a certificate saying, oh, you bought a box that's been bought in your name. So those are some really great ways people can get involved. And if you're a corporate or school, you can get involved in fundraising or get us to come do a program for you. And all of that is on our website, and you just have to contact us there. Absolutely
love it. Look, I just want to say, Gali and Maddy, to both of you, you're an absolute inspiration, and what an amazing social enterprise that you've created. And I am, I'm a big supporter and a big fan, and I am now going to make sure that everybody that I engage with and connect with knows about the work that you're doing at the Good Box. So thank you for giving up your time and jumping on today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have a yarn with you.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's been wonderful to chat to you, and I love your platform, and I think it's really important, really amazing. And so I really appreciate it.
Oh, no worries. I'm sure we will be in touch after this podcast for sure.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
No worries at all, Gali. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
You're welcome. Bye now. How amazing is that? Like, I actually have not had someone on the podcast yet that highlighted, well, not just talking about homelessness, but actually a solution. Gifting people a beautiful package box with everything in it that's new, not secondhand, and talking about dignity, talking about belonging and feeling connected. So I knew that you fellas would probably enjoy this yarn just as much as I did. And it is an issue in this country. Homelessness is, I guess, it's not getting any better. The rate of homelessness, especially with Indigenous Australians, is going through the roof. In particular, in places like the Northern Territory, where the intervention is still in full swing. And if you don't know what the intervention is, look into it, because it's absolutely horrific. I don't even like talking about the intervention in terms of how our people in the Northern Territory are treated by the government of today. So, yeah, jump online, have a look at the Good Box story, and there's an amazing story from the project that kind of took Maddy and Gali to a whole different level. So, yeah, I can't encourage anyone, if you want to do something good and if you want to contribute to society, buy somebody a box. Jump online, buy a box, or, get one sent out to you and drop it down to somebody the next time that you're walking to work and gift somebody one of their boxes. So on that note, that's all I have for now. Until next time, bye for now.
Don't forget to follow Black Magic Woman podcast on all social media platforms. To keep up to date with the latest episodes and news, head to blackmagicwoman.com.au. You can rate and review the podcast on iTunes, and please feel free to share the podcast with your family and friends.